Jim Smith. I was a U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia from 2009 to 2013. Senator Murphy, I really commend you for challenging the status quo. While you're at it, I would ask you to challenge the status quo of the current foreign policy architecture in the region, because it takes us down the path of always supporting the status quo. We have no inject point into any multilateral organization in the region. There is no economic development structure like the APEC structure in Asia that drives us in a direction of bringing people together. Everything is bilateral. When you do everything bilateral, it drives us into a status quo situation. We have 14 years to change the dynamic with Iran, or we're back to square one. If we don't think about a new architecture for the region, we're never going to get past the status quo as it is.
Ambassador, thank you, very much for the question and the suggestion. I would hope folks here might take a look at a piece that I wrote with two other senators, Senator Heinrich and Senator Schatz, making this case for a broader progressive foreign policy. Part of our pitch is that we are just miserably resourced to try to gain influence in the world, and the only way in which we are largely able to do that today is with our military and with military sales. And so we are selling hundreds of millions of dollars worth of military equipment in the region and have no comparative ability to try to help reset the economic agenda in the region, because we have a pittance of dollars when it comes to ways in which to be helpful on the projects that our allies, maybe in a multilateral way, want to engage in economic development.
Rosa Brooks, who served as a civilian advisor at the Pentagon, has written a fascinating book, How Everything Became War and the Military Became Everything. It describes how U.S. policy has been contorted by a military that keeps expanding while all other agencies wither. One of the blurbs on the back of the book says, "One of the most thought-provoking books I've ever read. It's as if we have been sleepwalking into this new world and Rosa has turned on a flashlight." That commendation comes from Jim Mattis, now the Secretary of Defense. A recent report from its Defense Business Board concluded that it could easily save $125 billion over 5 years by removing operational inefficiencies. Those savings alone would fund the entire State Department plus all foreign aid programs for 2.5 years. Gates used to note, "We have more people in military bands than we have foreign service officers."
So I just think that as a broader question of American foreign policy, we've got to understand that maybe a 20-to-1 balance in terms of military spending to foreign aid spending is not the right way to try to win friends and punish adversaries and enemies in the world, especially when almost every other country that's trying to grow influence has figured out that asymmetric influence is the way to go. We're kind of an apple in a world full of oranges these days. So that's a broader conversation, but a worthy one. If we're going to participate in these engagements, we've got to make sure that we are all on the same page with our allies, that those groups come first and other considerations come second. This is a complicated relationship, and when you get inaugurated in the United States Senate, you aren't taught about the complexity. You're taught that there are named enemies in the region and there are named friends. I'm not suggesting that we blow up that dichotomy, that we just understand that there's a little bit more gray. To me, it's all a reminder as to one of the reasons why we have been rather unsuccessful in the region trying to ply local actors to our ends. This is a complicated place that we fundamentally don't understand. And I think the lesson of all of the lessons over the last 15 years is to have a bit more humility about what the United States can and what the United States can't accomplish in the Middle East. You know, we tend to dream up these grand plans as to how we are going to try to affect the political reality on the ground. And in the end, I think history is going to suggest that we had a fairly minor role in the trajectory of the Middle East. This is a long-term sort as they try to figure out what they are going to be after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, a story that is likely going to take hundreds of years to tell. The United States can affect that, but we should be mindful of the mistakes of hubris. And while we try to intersect with some of these broad questions of regional hegemony, order our priorities In the case of Yemen, our priority has to be clear. The only true present existential threat to the United States comes from a terrorist group that becomes powerful enough to find its way to a weapon of mass destruction that can threaten the United States.
When the Pentagon goes to war, costs go through the stratosphere. In just one example, ProPublica tallied up the audits of the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan and found that the military had wasted at least $17 billion on a variety of projects.